it is 9th of August, Sunday the 9th of August, and having a look at the global indices. And so start off with Wall Street, and it's looking nice and bullish. This is nice and bullish on the daily, nice and bullish on the weekly, not overextended at all. It's got to push its way through this resistance level, hasn't quite got free of it just yet. So I'll be keeping an eye as we approach the previous highs. But in isolation, looking nice and bullish there. The monthly actually looks fine. It's broken through resistance here. This is something I spoke about last week. So far, it has managed to cross that line, and it is certainly looking more bullish than bearish. So I guess for me, the immediate concern this week will be how it approaches the previous high. As I said on the weekly, it's not that overextended, so leaning towards bullish this week. Okay, then having a look at the S&P. What I do want to comment on here is the last 4 or 5 days with the trading, just spectacularly good trending behavior. If I go and just go down to the lower time frames, just so I can compare it, that would have been offered some really good opportunities for intraday traders as well. So that looks pretty cool. What does a 2 hour look like? 2 hour also looks pretty good. So that has been overall very nice. Also not ridiculously overextended on the weekly, also coming into previous highs. Monthly coming up to those all-time highs as well. So that's really my main concern this week so far, looking relatively bullish. And in isolation, quite nice and healthy, which was not necessarily the case last week. We had those key levels to get past. So the Nasdaq has broken through. It's stalling a little bit here. It's not that overextended on the weekly compared to previous cycles. It is overextended on the monthly, absolutely, and a pullback down to 10,000 would be fantastic. So yeah, if we do get that, that's absolutely fine. But the other markets are actually looking pretty good. So Russell 2000 as well, really strong bullish week last week, starting to head away from its moving averages, but looks fine on the monthly. So all of those just that looking that little bit more, let's put it this way, they've had a good run this last week where I wasn't really anticipating so much bullishness. That doesn't mean they can't take a break this coming week, but they certainly aren't struggling. That's there's no real inherent signs of weakness. You can see here, looking at the FTSE 100, strong support found on that 6,000 level. Although we are in a downtrend on the weekly, and the monthly hasn't broken the low yet, so there's been no confirmed. This potential outcome of a longer term move down has not changed at this point in time. We just haven't followed through on that, and that's worth commenting. We still have a weekly downtrend. We have a monthly downtrend on the FTSE. And actually, we also have a weekly downtrend. So we just didn't follow through on that. So it'll be interesting to see this week if there is some sudden bearishness that comes out, which is, just when the market's looking fantastic, you get a bit of a move to the downside and then see if it breaks lower. But I have to say it is looking pretty good, even here on the EU stocks as well. It's still got to get back over that level. The weekly is still technically in an uptrend. That looks pretty good. And we haven't followed through on that bearish rejection candle from last week. So interesting to me, just as in we could see a break of that this week. Everything's so far looking nice and bullish. Beautiful here. The DAX finding some strong support. Nice bullish setup candle actually as a break and a retest of support. That bullish candle break of the high that could indicate a potential run up higher. The weekly looking good as well. Weekly bullish candle as well, being a potential setup to go higher. And no follow through on those rejection candles. As I said, I mean, it doesn't mean that can't happen, but certainly this week, compared to last week where it was kind of, leaning a little bit more bullish but bearish was definitely a possibility. It seems that this week, though, it's just, it had such a really good follow through that potential is certainly the case there. So I guess what I'm saying here on these last few where we've got these bearish kind of monthly kind of longer term trends, that's what I'm going to be keeping an eye on, because so far we haven't broken them. We are still within the same rejection, within that same kind of price range. We're still struggling up against resistance, and so that could ultimately play out. But having said that, the weeklies are starting to look more and more bullish. The dailies are holding strong above support. Even looking here at the ASICs, which isn't going anywhere, it certainly hasn't continued. It sort of hasn't started to go lower. So what I'm going to be doing this week is the way that I'm going to approach this, which makes the most sense to me, is yes on each of the others that look on the bottom half of these that look the most bearish. I'll be looking for price to potentially head lower to break those lows. In other words, this kind of a thing is only going to show itself over the next 2 months anyway. So I'll keep an eye on that. But at the same time with the US markets, I'm going to keep an eye on moves and opportunities to the upside as we approach previous highs, really, and any key levels of resistance up here towards, say, 1600 on the Russell, for example, and the tech as well, to see. That's interesting to me. Any kind of a nice little bullish setup here could be fine support on the previous highs here as well. So in principle, on the US markets, just feeling that a little bit more bullish than I was last week. On the other pairs, although they definitely have not followed through on that bearishness, I'm just going to keep an eye out, because as far as I'm concerned, we are still operating within the same monthly candles and therefore haven't really escaped that potential bearish swing high, which could lead to a larger or more bearish market. There we go. Hopefully that makes that a little bit clearer.